Hi, this is Everett, Everett's Watercolors. Welcome to my classroom and my brand new studio. This is one of the brand new studios I've set up here and getting ready to go. And today I'm going to be broadcasting live on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And I'm in my studio today with my wife, Gloria.
Welcome, everyone.
And she'll be monitoring the broadcast and checking the chat room. The chat room is live, so feel free to make comments or give me some questions. And I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Today I'm going to be working on a landscape in watercolor, and I did a plein air exercise last weekend, and I thought I'd bring it back here to the studio and demonstrate here some of the things I do. This landscape, let me take you over to my overhead camera, where my painting board is, and there's the reference photograph. You can see here it's a pathway in the woods and a nice light pattern of light coming through the trees, but the trees are very depthful here. I got a lot of depth and a lot of dimension here in those trees. But I think I can do a lot better on the painting. You can see here all the colors kind of, there's very little detail you can see back in there. I don't want a lot of detail, but I can show the depth and so forth by changing the focus and the values. What I've done is taken this photograph and I've created a design plan, put in the trees and the pathway and so forth. So this is my design plan here that I drew out that I'm going to be used for the painting today. So my photograph here, the reference photograph, and the design plan are all on my Holbein Watercolors page on my website. And you can go to my website. Let me go back to my main camera. Here, this QR code right here. The QR code here at the bottom. My bottom left, your bottom right is the QR code. That QR code, use your cell phone, point your camera at that, and it'll take you right straight to my website. And on there you'll find my Holbein Watercolors page, which you can look at the photograph and download the diagram. And you can paste it on Facebook. I have a Facebook page in the description of the video today, and you can post your painting or your practice on Facebook, and I can make a comment. So let's go back to my overhead camera again. Okay, materials I'm going to use today. I'm going to be using the Hake brush. This is a medium Hake, which measures about 1.5 inches wide, but it's a beautiful. It's made of goat hair and beautiful brush. I love this one. And I'll be using a small Hake also. The two small Hake and a medium-sized Hake. And they're on my website. And I'm using the number 16 round. This is a Holbein brush. It's synthetic, but it's a 16 round brush. Does really a lot of work here. It's got comes to a nice point and holds a lot of paint. And in the palette, I'm going to use a very limited palette. I'm going to use ultramarine blue up here at the top, and I'll be using a little bit of yellow ochre at the bottom, a little bit of burnt sienna, and a little bit of green, little greens, probably some of the green number 2 and hooker's green down here in the right corner at the bottom. And I'm also going to be using a little bit of dot spray. My palette in the bottle, dot sprayer. Here I got lemon yellow in here. I'll be putting on there to give me some little sunlight. So the palette in the bottle is available exclusively on everettswatercolors.com. So those are the materials I use today. Very simple. And what I've done is, let me put this aside here. Let me get the drawing out of my way. Okay, I got a little preliminary start here on the start out. I've transferred the drawing here to the quarter sheet of watercolor paper, Gemini watercolor. It measures 11 inches wide and 15 inches long from top to bottom. And I'm putting a portrait format here because it's going to be a long, the trees are tall and so forth, so the portrait format will work fine. Okay, so I went ahead, what I did was I put in with a Hake brush, I put in a graded wash here of some cool colors. I put greens, I put a little yellow in there, mixed it in. But that was the starting point of the top. And then I turned the paper around, and I did a graded wash of warm colors. Here I used a little bit of burnt sienna, and a little bit of pyro red, and maybe some orange. It's just kind of mixed in, made a little. This is pyro red, yellow orange, and a little bit of burnt sienna mixed in. And up here I used up here on the greens I used hooker's green, a little bit of a little bit of ultramarine blue, and a little touch of yellow, a little bit of yellow lemon here also. Okay, so I did a graded wash. You can see I left some white paper showing, and this is going to be my focal point in here, this area in here. And I'm going to have the light coming from this side with a shadow pattern on the ground. All right, so that kind of set me up here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up. I'm going to put in some text. I'm going to put in the trees first. I think I'll start with the trees. I'm going to start with the 16-inch round, 16 round Holbein brush, and I'm going to mix up a little bit of tree color. And the colors out there that I saw, I used a little bit of burnt sienna, and I put some of the lighter trees. I put a little bit of yellow ochre in there, and then I mixed that in with a little bit of ultramarine deep. So I got a mixture here, a mixture of brown and blue. Give me a darker color, darker browns. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and paint these. I mix these colors up. I got all three colors mixed up. Ultramarine blue mixed in with burnt sienna and a little bit of yellow ochre over here. Give me kind of a mix. Okay, now load the brush on the side, which I always do, and I'm going to go in and put in the these trees, these little foreground trees, or the ones that are in the front here. Okay, and I'll cut this out. I get the two big ones here. There's two big ones here, two bigger trees here in the forward part of the middle ground here. And then as I go back, and there was a larger one over here. It wasn't as on the outside edge of the painting. You don't want to get too much detail over here. So I'm just going to put just a hint of a tree over here, which is where it was, outside tree. Just get something started. And then there was now as I go back into the landscape, I'm going to get a little bit lighter in color, not as intense. So as you go further back in, away from this forward area, the trees get a little bit lighter. Now this forward tree here, it was two trees here. It was a little bit darker, and there was some leaves in front and behind. So I'm going to leave some gaps here where I can paint some leaves across the trees. So I'm kind of blocking in the shapes here, and we can go ahead and define those. Now again, as I go further back, I'm going to get a little bit less defined now. So the definition, what I'm calling this painting today is a little bit of definition and less detail, a little dimension. Give you some dimension in this particular painting. So by making these trees lighter as they go back, a little less defined, as you go back into the landscape, things get a little bit less defined. So we're going to emphasize that today. We're going to make the background trees way off here in the distance. You can still see them, but they're not going to be as detailed as the trees that are forward. Okay, so I'm just putting in those shapes a little bit so we have some reference points here. There's a tree right here in the middle there. Okay, now with a couple more trees over here. There's a larger tree here, which I'll get in. These trees were basically some evergreen trees back here, big old pine trees, but they're real tall. They have long trunks. They reached all the way up to the top of the canopy there of the wood scene, all the way to the sky. It looked like it. They were so tall they went as far as I could see. And because of all the branches and foliage, some of the tops you couldn't see. They were so far up. Okay, so I got a variety of shapes, I got a variety of sizes, and as I go back, you notice here that the trees get smaller as we go back into the distance. They get a little bit smaller and they get a little bit lighter in detail, a little bit lighter value. So we get a little bit smaller to go back, a little bit lighter. All right, so I'm going to let that one dry just a little bit, and I'm going to mix up some tree color now, some leaves. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave this brown here. We'll come back to that color a little bit later, a little bit more. But I want to go ahead and get the leaves started. So I'm going to put some darker leaves in, and I'm going to go ahead and mix up a little bit of dark Hooker's green, and I'm going to mix that in with a little bit of ultramarine blue. So that'll give me a dark green. Anytime you mix blue with a color, you're going to get a darker mix. It's going to be a darker mix. But I definitely want it to be a greenish color, but I don't want it to be as green as the Hooker's green is. So I mixed a little bit of blue in that. Yeah, I'm even going to pick up a little bit of, I got a little bit of royal blue over here. I really wanted to get this much darker. And just go through, I want to get one pass. I don't want to go over, I don't want to overwork the painting too much with too many brush strokes. So I'm trying to get the right color and the right value on the first try. The right value and the right color on the first try. Okay, and I'll take a little test sheet here. Yeah, that's about right. Okay, take a little test sheet of paper. Okay, so I'm going to go up here now. I'm going to start at the top corner here. And notice I don't have this Gemini 140-pound watercolor paper. I don't have it pasted down. It's just laying on my painting board, and because it doesn't bend, it doesn't fold or anything. It just stays in one spot. So it's easier to move around if I just let it loose. So I'm putting a loose leaf pattern up here in the top, of the painting, just to get started. And as I come down, I'm going to come in here with a darker. There's some dark areas and some light areas. Some sun coming through this way, so I'm going to have little patches of sunlight coming through. So I'm going to mix up some more of that color already. So let me go back here and mix up another little bit more batch. Dark green. So I'm using a Hake brush. I'm just using a little bit of what I call stipple, a little stipple with a brush. And that'll give me a leaf pattern. It'll look like trees, look like tree branches, and I'm going to come across there. Now as I come down, I'm going to get a little bit darker in this area. As I come down, I'll be a little darker over here. So I'm going to have a little shadow pattern across here. I'm trying to just block in the starting point here. Okay. I'm building a little pattern now. I'm trying to build a pattern, a little variety here. Have the sun come through. Sun's going to come through this area, so it's going to drop down a little bit. And I'm going to have the sun coming through the trees. Okay, all right. Now we're going to go to a lighter color now. I want to get a lighter color of green. That was a darker value. Now I'm going to go in now, and I'm going to put in, let's see, yeah. So I'll use the same color mix, but I'm going to put a little bit of water with it to give me a lighter value. Put a little more of that blue in. Now I'm going to go in now, I'm going to go in and just kind of go in and do some rough fill-ins. I'm filling in some of the areas that are open with a lighter value, a lighter mix. And also working a little bit on the edge control here, trying to make it look a little more like leaf patterns. A little more down here. Okay. Now I think what I'll do now is I want to get a little more. I want to get a little more color in here. So I'm going to go in with a little bit, just a touch of green, right in this area, just a little bit of green. Then I'm going to use that spray bottle. Prime the pump in the water bucket. Just a few drops in here. This is where the light's coming through the trees. I'm going to put a little bit of yellow in here, a little bit of yellow coming through the trees, and a little bit over here, just a touch, but more over here. Okay, now I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to let it dry. I'm not going to blow dry, I'm just going to let it dry naturally. And see, what I'll do is move some of that color around a little bit. Let's see, I'll take the Hake brush and spread that yellow around just slightly. I want to get a little bit of color in those tree limbs. It'll look like sunlight coming through that area. Sunlight coming down here through the center. All right. And I'm going to take this. I'm going to take some of this color on my brush now. I got the yellow. Green, and put that down here where the kind of like where the focal point is. Focal point right down in here. Okay. Let's let that dry now. Let's let that dry. Right now, it's always a rough look at when you take a look at the first part of it. So we're going to let that dry. Now I'm going to work down here at the bottom. So we're going to clean out the brush. Now when I clean out the Hake brush, I use a towel. And I put the Hake brush in the rinse bucket, and then I squeeze the Hake out of all excess water. And what that does, that cleans the brush. That cleans the brush. Okay, then I'm going to mix up some. This burnt sienna I have is okay. I'm going to use part of this burnt sienna down here.
Before you start that, the question on how hard do you tap that spray bottle?
It's a light tap. When you use a spray bottle, it's just a light tapping motion to give you a little dot pattern. If you press too hard, it'll come out real hard. It'll come out to be a large dents. If you want to see it on the taper, it's just a light tapping motion, and you get a spread of dots, and that's what you want. You want a nice dispersion of those drops out there. Okay. Because if you press too hard, you'll get a big blob of paint. You don't want that. Okay. All right. So good question. I like that. Now what I want to do now is mix up here for the ground. I'm going to mix up. Now on the ground here in this forward area, this was all pine needles. So it was a reddish, that's why I got to start it with a red tone here. It was a reddish color. So I'm mixing up now a little bit of burnt sienna now, a little more red in it. And a little bit of orange. So I want a nice warm color down, nice warm. And that'll contrast nicely with the green. Now I'm going to take my another brush, which I didn't tell you. This is the number 4 rigger, Holbein synthetic brush, number 4 rigger. I'm going to load that up, and I'm just going to do brush strokes across here. And these are going to simulate the pine needles. They'll just be wild brush strokes, different angles. And what I can do now is take this. Let me take the Hake brush, take out the water. I'm taking out the water, and I'll just push that into the mix. And I'll drag that across here also. So I want to have some marks. So I'm roughing this area up with streaks, and these streaks are simulating the pine needles. This place was loaded with pine needles across the front here. So if you I put the brush out here. we go here, we look at the picture, this whole area down here on the pathway was all pine needles right here. Now, it doesn't look very red here in the photograph because there was a lot of sun out here, but when I was there, it was very reddish. So that's what I'm using. I'm simulating the reddish color of the pine needles. Let me get a little more in there. Put a little burnt sienna with that pyro red. And I'm just going across the paper here. I'll go back to that rigger brush. And I did this on location also. I did the same sort of painting. And we'll review that when we finish painting today. Okay. And now I'm going to go back with a rigger brush and get more definition out of those pine needles. Very, very random brush stroke, very random, but crisscross. They were laying flat across the pathway. A little bit darker down here in the foreground, a little bit darker. So what I can do is take that Hake brush, get a darker color down here. A little more water in the Hake brush. If I get too much water in the Hake brush, it's going to make it too loose and wet. So I'm trying to keep the Hake brush nice and dry, patting it out on a towel, and then picking up the brush, spreading out the bristles by pushing down, and then going back in and then doing that rough brush stroke across the paper. Okay, now I'll go back to the round brush again. Now as I go a little bit further forward, I'm going to have the strokes are going to get a little smaller to simulate that, a little further away from the eye, and they'll be a little less defined. But I still want that texture look. I'm building texture now. This is texture of the pine needles. So you want you want to practice some kind of brush stroke that really identifies this area that you're painting. And I have found that either a dry brush stroke with a flat brush like the Hake, or using in this case, the rigger for smaller areas. And then do a very ragged, irregular pattern to simulate those pine needles. Now as I go back into the distance here, I'm going to even get smaller, just a hint now of some of those pine needles there across the pathway. They get a little bit lighter because they're further away, a little bit lighter, less defined. They still have the same color, but they're not as prominent, not as bright as the foreground. The foreground is a lot brighter because it's closer. Okay. Now we're still blocking the painting in. We haven't done anything really a lot of detail yet. We're blocking in the elements, getting in the basic color. Then we're going to go back and do a little more detail on some of the areas to bring it together as a painting. Okay. All right. Let's let that sit. I'm going to put the blow dryer on and dry that wet paint up here. Is still the wet paint of yellow. So let me go up here. Let me put the blow dryer on. I'm going to dry this area up in here. Okay, and I got a few areas that got the paint still wet, so I'm going to take a paper towel and just kind of blot it up a little bit. That way, because this is a demonstration. I just want to move on now to show. This is a demonstration of what I did and how to do it. And as you're painting this, you can take more time to do that. But as far as demonstration purposes, I just want to show you how I did it. So I'm blotting up some of the wet areas, the wetter areas, so I can move on. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go back in. I'm going to define some of these areas a little better. So I'm going to go in now. I'm going to put in a little darker values. So these foreground trees, I'm going to put a little. These were pretty red, so I'm going to put a little more definition here of the foreground. This foreground tree right here was very prominent. And also I'm going to paint between the leaves, so it makes it look like the leaves are overlapping, which they were. They were overlapping up into the higher canopy there of the trees. Okay. And then this one next to it was a little bit darker, so I'm going to put a little more blue in that one because it was a little bit behind and had a darker value to it. So I'm going to change the value. I don't want these to be the same color. It's always when you do a painting, you want variety. You don't want to have two items like a tree next to each other with the same color, the same shape. You want to make a little difference. So this one's kind of leaning out a little bit. But it's still tall. It's still a tall tree. Okay. Now this one over here was another dark, sort of a dark brown, which is a different color than this one over here. Put a little more burnt sienna in that. So add a little more burnt sienna to that blue. It gives me a darker brown, but not quite as dark as that other tree. And I got some branches hanging over the trees, so I can show a little bit of the trunk showing through. A little bit up here. Okay, that demonstrates the. Now let's shape this one a little bit. So let's go in here. Make this a little wider. There we go. Correcting that little brush stroke a little bit, make it look a little bit different. Okay. And this one here I can get a little bit wider at the bottom. Okay. All right. And this, the ones behind that, they're getting a little bit darker, but not as dark as these two forward ones. So I can put a couple dark ones back in here. I'm putting less paint on the brush. I'm blotting out my brush on a wet sponge over here, taking out a lot of the excess paint. And way back here in the background now, I still want to put some paint back there, but it's not very. Okay. And I'm working on these other trees. Just we got a little definition showing that there's a woods, and it was a lot of trees out here. There were a lot of trees, and I'm not painting every one of them. I'm just painting enough to represent that part of the landscape. A lot of trees, a lot of foliage, beautiful foliage. I really enjoyed painting this on location. Now, we'll go over the painting after I finish this little demonstration here. We'll go over the painting I did and show you some differences. And this one here has some definition on it, but not much. Okay, and some over here. Always give a little treatment over here to the side. Don't have one side all by itself. Come over here now and do a little balance. So this side's got a little more definition, so forth. I want this to be the more definition, but over here I want a little balance. So come over here and repeat some of the shapes, which are tree shapes. But there won't be as many. It won't be as prominent looking, but still it'll have the element of tree. It'll have the shape of tree, which is what I want to show. Okay. All right. Then I think what I'll do is I want to also want to work on the bush line, the bushes. So I'll take a little bit of that Hooker's green and some of that ultramarine blue and make a dark mix of green, very dark. And I want to go in here now and I'm going to put in some real dark bush line. These were very dark. Now this is what will really set off the painting now, these darks against the lights. But there were some tall bushes, some green bushes here around these base of these trees, behind the trees. And that'll kind of separate the tree and also give a little more definition to that part of the landscape. I want to vary the edges. Don't want to have them all the same. So make a little up and down shape. But some were taller, some were shorter. So these small green bushes now all the way down this pathway, all the way down to the impact. This is the impact area or the focal point. Now I'll make a little variation here on the edge of the path. I'm going to get a little bit of variation so that it doesn't all look the same. We have a little bit of variety here. And there were some also some bushes over here on some green bushes are on this side of on the other side of the pathway over here. Again, repeating or doing a little bit of echoing over here to give me balance. There was greenery over here at the side also. So I want to balance the painting by having similar elements, similar colors on different parts of the painting that make it look like it's belongs there. And I'll have put up a little bit of there was a little bit of greenery over here. Okay. All right. I think what I need to do now is kind of give me a little. What I'm going to do is pick up a little bit of a mixture. I'm going to use the mixture in the palette. This is what palette color. I'm just going to take I'll make sure I got some green in it, but mixed in with the brown. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tone down some of these areas now, make them a little bit less, mute the color down a little bit. I'm going to put a little bit of red in there, in with that green, to give me a muted mixture. Gives me a gray, a brownish gray with a little bit of green in it, or a little bit of red in it. Okay, now take the Hake brush, the medium-sized Hake, and I'm going to go in now. I'm going to go in and knock down some of these areas. Putting some shadows in here a little bit, a little shadow color. Knocking down some of those lighter areas because I really want to show the light coming through this section. So in order to do that, I need to reduce the light areas around that. Show more shadows. Now, what I think I'll do is take the round brush, number 16 round. I'm going to mix up a little more green, And I'm going to go in here now and I'm going to put in some definitions of leaves. edges of some of these branches. I'm going to put a little bit of texture here, showing a leaf shape from these trees, just to give a little more definition. And it's going to be more emphasis around the focal point down here. A little more emphasis around the focal point. A little more definition. And I'll do a little bit around the other side, but not as much. More emphasis over here. And as I go out, I'll put some strokes out here, but it won't be as many, and it won't be as defined. Just to show a hint of a leaf shape. And over here, I'll repeat that over here on this side just a little bit. A little leaf shape up here in the branches. Okay. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a very light yellow green, mixing that lemon yellow in with that green with a lot of water. And I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to put in that light color. Okay. All right, now the last thing I want to do here is I want to work on a shadow pattern. And so I'm going to use the burnt sienna, mixed in a little bit of ultramarine blue, and a touch of pyro red, just a touch of it, because the red here I want a reddish, but I want it to be a cooler color. So I put a little bit of blue into it. Okay, and I want it to be dark enough. Oh, that's too dark. I put it on a test paper here. It's too dark, so I got to warm it up a little bit. Put a little more burnt sienna in it, a little more red, a little more water. Okay, that's better. Okay. Okay. So the first mix I did was too dark, so I added more burnt sienna, a little more water, and I got a lighter mix. So that's the color. That's the color I want here. Okay, that was too dark. Too dark. All right, so I'm going to go in with this lighter mix now. I'm going to go in now with these, say, larger trees now. Now I'm going to start with this one right here. I've changed my mind. I'm going to go ahead and put a shadow pattern. The light's coming from here, so I'm going to use this as an opportunity to put a shadow pattern across here, across the pathway. I'm building a pathway, so I'm using that darker color as I come across. And what I'll do is I see a slight correction I want to do here. As I go back, I want to have a little bit lighter. So I'm going to take a little bit of tissue and blot this far away, a little bit further away, and blot those up just a touch. I want those to be lighter as I go back. And we can always adjust that once we get to the front here. We can always adjust that a little bit later. And this tree over here will be kind of white. This is all. Now the brush is too small, so I'm going to take the small Hake and put some paint in it finally, and take that color A little bit of, that's burnt sienna, a little bit of that pyro red. And I'm going to bring that across here. So it's a bigger brush, holds a bigger brush load. The Hake holds a lot of paint. Has a bigger brush load, so I can use that. I can move it a lot faster using the Hake brush. As the sun is coming across these this bushes here, so they're going to cast a shadow also. And up here in the foreground, the closest area up here in the foreground is going to be it's going to be a lot darker, and it's going to be the one that's going to be the darkest of all. So I make up a bigger mix of that brown and ultramarine blue, a little bit of red in it. Okay, all right. Let's take this. Now I'll kind of back up a little bit now and take a look at the design I have here, and I go and make a few minor marks. Well, let's see. I'm gonna take some more. I'm gonna take the round brush. Nope. I'm gonna keep the small Hake. The small Hake does a good job. I'm gonna take some of that, little bit of that green, mixed in with that brown. That'll give me a cool gray. It'll have a green mixed in with the brown color. It gives me a cooler brown. And I'm gonna go in and mark a little bit more, some more shadows back in here. That way I want that center area to really pop out. And the only way you can make that center lighter is to make the area around it darker. Shadow across some of these tree trunks. And knock down some of these lighter areas over here. So I'm really modifying the light. I want the edges to be a little bit duller. Take away that light area. I don't want that to compete with the center of interest. Oh, okay. All right. Okay, let me put I think I already put the mat around this, then we'll talk about some other paintings I did with the same format. So, pick this up a little bit. I can put a mat around that, and let's take a look at the final broadcast here. Okay. All right. Okay, well I got the light pattern coming from this side over down across the pathway, and I've got the pathway. Now I got dimension. I've got the light area here, and I got dark all the way around, the shadow pattern and the shadow pattern coming across here. So it takes you right into this. All takes you right into the background where the impact area is, where the focal point is. Take another Another one? Okay. All right. Thank you, Gloria. We'll put a green one on. That might make a little difference. It's a dark color. It's okay. All right. So, and I think also the color combination, I get the greenery of the trees against the reddish or warm portion of the pine needles, and I think that's a nice contrast. And then the shadow pattern taking you back into the down the pathway and into the focal point, which is the light area down here where the sun is coming through. Okay, and these trees here are a little more defined. They were forward. They were darker. As you go back, these far back trees get smaller and they get lighter in value, back in the background here. Okay, well that was really what I wanted to demonstrate today. So let me show you another one I did earlier. Yeah, and most of my paintings, I prepare another painting, and you notice here I did a little. I wanted to change it around. I didn't want to do the same kind of painting. So what I did was I used the same colors. A lot of greenery up here for the trees, and I added in some branches. You can see here I added in branches here, but I have the shadow pattern coming down this way, which leads you right into the focal point. And I didn't want to copy that. I wanted to do the other one, which was more dramatic across the side. If I bring this up close to you, you can see some of the detail of the trees and the branches and so forth. Okay, so that puts a little more emphasis here, adding some branches, a little more work on the trees, a little more yellows in there and so forth. But I think the difference in this one was I had the direction of the shadows coming in this direction here versus going across the path. Okay. So that's the one I did earlier this week. And now here's the one I did on location. This is the painting I did on location. I did this looking at the photograph I showed you in the very beginning. Again, it's not exactly like the photograph. Exactly, but that's what I was looking at. This is the view I looked at when I was painting this plein air. And I did this painting here on location. And you can see some of the things are basically the same, but then there are some differences. But I got the pathway in there, and I got the impact area in the background was lighter, and I got the trees and the texture of the ground. So I think it worked out both ways. So there you see 3 examples of the same scene, all painted a little bit differently. I never want to do the same one the same way. So this is the one I did last Saturday on location. This is the one I did in the studio after I planned out my painting. I changed the trees a little bit, and I also made a shadow pattern a little bit different on this one. And this is the one I did today for demonstrations. And put this back here. So by adding in the branches and so forth, that's not a big problem. I can take the rigger with a little bit of burnt sienna, a touch of ultramarine blue, deep. And I can go in there and I can find a place here where I can put in some limbs. So this is really detail. It's not necessary in the demonstration purposes, but just to show you, to go back in and add in some detail, it would give it a little more interest. And again, something like this you don't want to overdo. You just want to put something in there, maybe around the impact area. We might want to put in a branch over here. It's going across the slightly pathway, and maybe a couple branches down here, closer to the impact area. Again, we don't want to overdo, but we can add more detail. And some of these gaps in here, those are good places to put branches. This gap right here would be a place to put a branch, maybe from this side. So that's what those darker areas are for, is to put branches in between the clumps of leaves and so forth. And we can put a little more. We can put some twigs down here, some long weeds or stalks of things along. So you can add more detail, add more color, whatever. So those are just final points you can make to a painting. So that concludes my painting exercise for today. So let's go to my main camera. Oh, so well, that was really a good exercise in dimension and adding a little bit of depth to a painting that gives it the contrast and the shadow patterns, which helps out the definition of the pathway and so forth. So I appreciate you checking in today. Would recommend request that you subscribe to my YouTube channel and go to my Facebook, and also you can download the photograph and the drawing, and you can post it on Facebook. And I'll have that link here on the bottom of the description of the video today. So I'll be back again next week, Thursday at 2:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be here today at 7:30. I'm going to do Simply Drawing with Everett at 7:30. And you know what? I'm at my main camera. Let me go back. There it is. The camera keeps flaking off and on. I don't know what the problem is. I have to keep checking that out. But sometimes it goes off. But I got a Simply Drawing with Everett at 7:30 this evening, and I'm going to be working on perspective. So yeah, it's really going to be a good one. This is one of my favorite ones to talk about. And so if you have time, come back in and look at my 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can also see the replay on Facebook and LinkedIn and on YouTube. So, and subscribe to both of those. I'd like to have you make comments and subscribe to both of those videos. So thank you much for looking in, and I'll see you next week at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, goodbye for now.